Live in 3, 2, 1. And welcome everybody to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. I'm so thrilled to have an amazing singer and composer and just vocal talent beyond anything I've ever heard. Please join me in welcoming to the show, Aubrey Johnson.
Hey everyone, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, I think let's get you just a little closer into the mic, maybe, because I don't want
Sure.
it to be that soft. So
Yep, I have
just
an
turn it
external
up
mic here. I'll
just.
just pull it closer. How's that?
That's perfect. So
That's
Aubrey,
better.
it's okay with you. I just want to tell a quick story about how we met because we're doing this in October of 2020, and last Sunday I was on Facebook, and it's Grammy season, and there's all these people sending their flood of albums around and stuff. And I had been listening to albums since people started sending me stuff in June, so I'd already heard about 700 albums before it was Sunday morning, and I see your picture, and you're on Facebook saying, "Hi, my name's Aubrey, and I'm a singer, and I'm up for what it's best jazz vocal."
That's right.
Yeah, best jazz vocal album. And I'm thinking, well, she's decent looking, so maybe I'll give it a shot. I know, isn't that
Take all
horrible?
the help you can get,
I
right?
know, isn't that horrible? So, but I said, all right, well, I'm going to click over there and just see what happens. So I click over, and there's this video of you with your band. I think it was shot in New York City,
Mhm.
and it's an original piece of yours called Lie in Wait. So I'm listening to this song and I'm going, this sounds strangely familiar, but also brand new at the same time. And then it's going on. And then about and everybody, you should mark this, like just pull it up on YouTube, Aubrey Johnson, Vivo, Lie in Wait. And if you're an impatient person, just click right to like 3:53 and then just prepare to go straight to the moon. It's just so unbelievably good. And I hear a lot of singers, but you were doing these instrumental lines, and I'm thinking, and then the chords are like Lyle Mays, and I'm going,
You
that's
really thought that
yeah.
at
I
that
mean,
moment?
because
That's so cool.
there's a thing that goes from the 6 minor to the 4 major, which is what everybody does. But then there's a modulation note after the 16 bars where you hold that vocal note and it becomes
Hmm.
the 7 in the new key.
Yep.
And the only people that do that is Lyle and Pat. So I heard that and I said, wait a minute, that's Lyle and Pat. And then you start doing this other thing, trading off with the violin player at about 4:30, and I'm just transported. So then I messaged you
Hmm.
and I said, wow, this is incredible. And, did you write that song? And then, maybe you can take it from there about what we talked about and about your new album, which is just incredible. It's called Unraveled. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us.
Um, yeah, Unraveled came out in March, like March 20th, so like kind of a week after the lockdown.
Uh,
Um, it's my debut album, so not great timing, but I was happy to have a lot of great people's ears on it, and I had really good publicist Lydia Liebman and a good radio team, Groove Marketing, out in California. So yeah, we tried to get it out there as much as possible, and my label Outside in Music got me on the Grammy, or submitted me for the Grammy ballot consideration. So my
nice.
first time with all of this, yeah, and
Oh, wow. Your first timer.
yeah, so I didn't really know, like, to send you my album in June or anything like that. Um,
Well,
but
in
I
June, we were all just kind of going, are we going to be dead by July?
that is true.
But to your point about having your album come out during the virus, and I was sitting in a radio station in the 90s with this great album, and I'd worked really hard, and I had Ernie Watts, and I had Joel Taylor, and I had Dave Carpenter, and I'm sitting there, and it's 5 minutes till 5, and my interview starts at 5, and at 5 o'clock, the news came out that, oh, we're in the Persian Gulf War, so we're canceling you, Mullins.
Oh my God, that's
Like,
terrible.
I had flown all the way to the place and everything. I'm sitting
Um,
there with the album going, no, right? So,
so you
but
know what it's
you've
like.
obviously plowed through and, I just started seeing you on the internet promoting your album last week. And it's just
Yeah,
a lot of
I'm so
originals.
So glad you caught up to it. Second to last day of the voting.
Right.
But yeah, I was so excited to receive your message and just so honored that you took the time to check it out and that you liked it. And then you really, it seems like you really got it. Like you saw the connection between Lyle, which we'll talk about, I know, and just respected my composing and arranging. And I really appreciate that because I'm a singer, but I'm also like equally a band leader and a composer and an arranger. And that whole project is not just me singing; it's it's my musical vision, entirely. I co-produced the album with Steve Rodby, the
Oh,
bass player
Steve,
of the
great.
Pat Metheny Group,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. All right.
and amazing friend and human, but he really was involved, in the post production, all the recording and getting everything together was me. So I'm glad that that's recognized because usually when someone sees a vocal album, they unfortunately might assume that it's just someone, just a singer. But obviously, we know that there are a lot of amazing singers that do it all. So it's cool to be recognized for that. And it was
Well,
so nice to get in touch with you. And
well, sure. I mean, but there's a lot of singers that do it all, but nobody does what you're doing. And that's what I thought was so different about it because I'm watching the video of your band. And by the way, how did you get Jim Carrey on drums?
Jim Carrey, Jeremy Noller, yeah, I never
No,
thought about it. You
I'm
kind of,
just kidding. I first watched it, I was
I
like,
know.
is that Jim Carrey? I think that's
I never
Jim
thought
Carrey
about
back
his
there.
resemblance. I'm sure he'll be
but
tickled to hear that.
I was just trying to take it all in because hearing the influences, which were to me, they just like jumped out. I'm like, okay, I'm hearing some Joni Mitchell, I'm hearing some Lyle, I'm hearing some Pat, I'm hearing some Ella, I'm hearing stuff that I've never heard before. And then all of a sudden, here's a bass clarinet playing and a violinist and stuff. How did you create such an interesting, like unique ensemble?
So the ensemble kind of happened really organically. It's actually kind of a silly story, but I'll just tell it. When I
Okay.
was in grad school and getting ready for my recital, I wanted to have like several horn players, and I accidentally asked two alto sax players because I thought one of them was a tenor player, and I just was wrong. And so instead of telling one of them that I didn't want them to be on it, I had the other alto sax player play all of his doubles. He was an amazing friend, Michael Thomas. He's great. Actually, he was nominated for a Grammy last year with his
Wow.
big band. But yeah, he was a friend, and so he played like alto flute and bass clarinet and soprano sax, and so it got me actually writing for all these textures really just because I knew him. And so then I think I stuck on the bass clarinet. I was like that. I love that sound. And then
Yeah.
the violin was also really organic. I had been working with her, Tomoko Omura, in this band in Boston called the Guy Mendelo Ensemble, like a
Uh-huh.
world folk band. They're really awesome. And she and I bonded over being jazz players and improvisers together. And again, I think I had a gig and I needed a sub for like, I think at that time my band was like alto and tenor, like once I graduated. And I was like, why don't I just try having violin? I'll just like adapt these parts. And then I loved it. I
It's
was like,
great.
so I came upon it by accident. And then I just thought this sound is perfect. And I love having the opportunity for her to use arco and pizzicato, and then for bass clarinet. He also plays clarinet sometimes in the band, even though it's not on the record,
Wow.
and soprano and alto. And so I liked to have all those options, all the colors to write for, and that's why I ended up having them. And then then it's just piano, bass, and drums, typical rhythm
Well,
section.
yeah, and I mean, I don't usually think of jazz having very much bass clarinet if it's not Eric Dolphy or Benny Maupin,
Hmm.
and
or
right.
or big band music, like
Yeah, or big band,
Maynard's.
and I came from big band, but I don't keep up with it really. But now you've got this ensemble of all these players and stuff, and uh, how do you just figure out what to get everybody to do? I mean,
I
how do
mean,
you
I
how
had
do
done a lot of writing in grad school. I went to New England Conservatory, and it was a very creative environment where all my classmates were composing, and all of my
oh
teachers were incredible performing musicians, and the ensembles were very uh, composition based and arranging based. Like one of my ensemble teachers was Danilo Perez,
wow.
and Jerry Bergonzi and Dominique Eade, amazing singer that lesser known but incredible. And so all these amazingly cutting edge creative people in Boston were influencing us, to write and be adventurous. And so that's where it came from. And by that time I finished school, I'd been leading a band for like 5 or 6 years. I kind of right away started putting together the Aubrey Johnson group, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like that it all happened really, you know, it just happened along the way. I learned how to write, you know, in school, but also just being other people. I was also a side person a lot. I
Oh,
am
really?
still in other people's bands. And so I got to see their writing and their band leading. So it's just, it was
Oh,
like a confluence of all this stuff that came together. And then once I started my version of my band in New York, we did a lot of gigs where I wasn't putting pressure on myself to record. I kind of felt like I wasn't ready as a composer or as a singer. And because of that, I had like several years, you know, to workshop a lot of material and rehearsals and gigs. And I had a lot, you know, these wonderful people in my band that were willing to try stuff out and give their feedback. So that's how it developed.
yeah,
Yeah.
so well, it's very organic, and it seems kind of like it's really natural how it happened. It's kind of, you know, there's this kind of blessing over you in a way.
I
And
don't know.
I know you may, I don't know if you believe in that stuff, but one of my guests earlier this Grammy season was Michael Hoppe, who told the story about how he had this experience when he was 65 or something, that he found out that his father was not his real dad.
Wow.
And his family had suppressed this information for 60 years.
Oh my
And he found this thing out right as one of the people in his family was dying. They sent something to his brother and he was crushed.
God. Hmm.
So he wrote, as the cathartic experience, he wrote a whole requiem and an album called Peace and Reconciliation.
Hmm.
And when he wrote that, all of a sudden, just all this stuff started happening to him. Like he got contacted by that great choir out in Sedona, Arizona, and they said, "Oh yeah, we love you, and we have fans here. Why don't you bring your beautiful thing, and we'll perform it?" And
Wow.
so, wow, and he, you know, just out of the blue, then he said, "Well, yes, I'd love to perform there." And he went there, and they said, "Well, do you want to record it? We've got all the stuff." Well, yeah, but I could never pay for that. It's too expensive.
Hmm.
They said, "Well, there's somebody here that's your fan, and they're going to pay for it."
Wow. That's
And this,
amazing.
I mean, it's this amazing story. And then at the end, they hand him the master recording and say, "You have all the rights to your recording."
That's amazing.
It's amazing. And I see there's
Lucky
kind of
person.
like, you know, little, because I've gotten into lots of trouble in my life. I'll be honest about that. I've lived way out on the edge and been saved by many angels,
Mm.
you know, and I feel like there's just some sort of a, you know, angelic thing going on when I hear you singing up in that high range and doing all that. And then some of those notes and lie in wait, it's at like it's either at 335 or 353. You do this one line and I go, "That's a Lyle Mays melody. That came
Oh.
right from Lyle. I've never heard a singer sing that." And then you and I started talking yesterday when we were preparing for the show, and you just, you know, said, "Well, I happen to know Lyle, who died this year," which is a huge loss for the jazz community because he was so unique in everything that he did. And I was never close to him. And I said, "Well, how do you know Lyle?" And he said, "Well, he's my uncle."
Hmm. That's right.
So then all these other kinds of things started to make sense because I thought, well, she must have been growing up as a little girl, like going backstage on the Pat Metheny tours with the family and stuff, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, I grew up in Wisconsin, and every time they would come through, and that's where Lyle's from too, they
Uh-huh.
would come through Milwaukee or Chicago. We'd always drive down and see them, and yeah, that was just my life. Like, and it was interesting because now I'm a jazz musician, so like everyone I know knows who Lyle is, and it matters. But growing up, you know, my friends at school didn't know who Lyle was. You
Right, of
know,
course.
so it was just kind of like this thing, like my uncle is famous, and I get to see him every once in a while at his concerts. And then my parents are really awesome jazz fan. My dad's a huge jazz fan. My mom is a super talented musician. My mom is his
Wow.
sister,
Now
and
your runs in the
even though she
family.
didn't professionally pursue it, you know, fully in the way that he did, but they played his music around the house like my whole life. So like
Uh,
I was born hearing that music and hearing their use of the voice as an instrument.
right.
So when I started classical piano lessons when I was 7, I just sang everything that I played, and I thought that's just what people would do. I just thought that's what you do. And my teacher would always be like, "Oh, I really like that you're singing." And I was like, "Yeah, of course I am." And so then as I got more advanced, I would keep singing everything. Like, I was playing like Bach preludes and fugues, and I would challenge myself to sing all those, sing the lead line and stuff, or the top line. And so that's kind of how that happened. The part, that's his influence for sure. Like that, it made sense to my ears to sing instrumental things.
Well,
Um,
yeah, the voice as an instrument was, always such a big part of what Lyle and Pat were doing, because there'd be these
mhm,
full albums where the singers would never really say lyrics. They would just be
yeah.
oh oh oh, or way oh or
Mhm,
way oh, or some
mhm,
Brazilian thing. But it was used so much more like a integral part of the ensemble
mhm,
and the melody lines. And when I heard you singing that line, I was like, there's got to be a connection there. And then
mhm.
yesterday, this was what really blew me out yesterday. And I hope you don't mind me telling this, but
It's fine.
um, I never was close to Lyle. I was always a fan. I had friends that went to North Texas State with him, and they said, yeah, Lyle is just doing everything. He's arranging these albums, like the Lizard album for a big band, and then he can play, straight ahead, like an SOB, like his, version of the song is You that he recorded in North Texas. It just blew me out how he would put all the 2-5-1s going into the bridge around the circle, C,
Mhm,
F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp minor, B7, and then boom, you land on that E. And I'd never heard anybody do that. And
mhm,
so I've been a fan all this time, but then when you started talking about Wisconsin and we started talking about other sides of Lyle that maybe the public doesn't know, because I never knew anything about Lyle.
mhm.
Seemed like he was kind of a quiet guy, and then there wouldn't be those guys that come off tour, and it wouldn't be like it was for Van Halen, because when Van Halen would come off tour in the 80s, they would all come down to the Baked Potato in LA and hang out.
Mhm.
So it would be, and they were a really rowdy bunch of guys. But I always felt like, well, I don't really know much about what else Lyle does, but I knew that he had kind of a scientific brain.
Absolutely.
And tell us
Mhm.
about, how that scientific brain and his architecture skills impacted you, because that's a great
Sure.
story.
Yeah, well, so when I was born outside of Chicago actually, and my family relocated to Green Bay, Wisconsin. My parents had always wanted to build their own house, and Lyle always had an interest in architecture and had taught himself, how to design. And so he said, to my mom, like, what do you want? What kind of house do you want? I'll design it for you. And so
Nice.
together they collaborated and made this beautiful design. And then like my parents built the house. So I grew up in the house that Lyle designed, which is really cool. And when he would come over, he would tell me like what he imagined for each space. And
No way. Like
yeah,
this would be the music room, or this would be the
yeah,
bedroom.
yeah.
Wow.
We had a music room. We did have a music room. We do. My parents still live in that house with a gorgeous
Wow.
grand piano that I grew up playing. And he always, like, I loved that he had such a sense of design and flow, like just in every area. And he said like in our house, there's like this large kitchen area and this open space, and then the dining area, and the whole thing is like it's very open and lots of light and sun. And he imagined the space like between the dining room and the kitchen to be like a stage area, like not literally, but like where like the kids would stand up and show their parents things or make jokes, and people would stand. And it's so crazy because that's exactly what that area was in our house growing up. Like everybody would always do funny dances there, like like tell a story from school, and at one point I did a house concert at our house, like in our music room, kind of like we had maybe like 30 to 50 chairs set up, like we took the dining room table out and everything, and I was standing in the entrance of the music room performing, and he loved that so much. He's like, I never envisioned that spot as a performance space, but it's so cool and sweet that that happened anyway. Yeah, so
That's incredible, because I knew Lyle was a scientific genius, because if you take his manuscripts, and Pat for that matter, and you analyze what's going on there, it's very logical and it's very scientific.
absolutely. Yeah. And that was he talked to me a lot about his process, and he would talk, and I mentioned this to you yesterday. He'd talk very specifically about the two phases where you'd have your inspiration, where you would just let like accept all ideas, and like we all do, every composer knows how that goes. But then he would say, then after that you need to actually turn on a different part of your brain, like at least like the way that he did things and the way he thinks that like composition should work. And mine, mine your material, and like take what you have and manipulate it and make it function as different things in the piece and put it all together and assemble it, and really like emphasize that you need to like think in different ways when you do these things, and don't expect your scientific putting things together process to feel like your inspiration phase.
Oh, wow, interesting.
And he would say like you need to get in there and roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. You can't just like, because like the way that I would do things is like I think of something and then I keep playing it over and over again and be like, what's next? Play it and like, oh, this thing comes next. Okay. But his thing was all about how like you have these pieces that you develop and then you figure out how to work them together. And, different events don't have, like events that you write don't have to happen in the order that you write them, and he was very,
Oh,
and which, we composers, I think good composers know that anyway, but it was something I really needed to learn and really helped me. And it was really hard for me to like, to think that way because it takes some maturity and discipline, and you want writing to feel so like the inspiration phase, and of course there are so many different ways to compose, which now I understand a lot better, but I really appreciate what he taught me, and I use that in my writing certainly all the time.
so he'd be on tour doing all these massive things and stuff, and then would you put your ideas together, and then he comes home for like Thanksgiving, you go, Uncle Lyle, what do you think about these three little ideas and stuff? I mean, was that kind of the process for you?
Well, actually, when he was really touring, I was too young. I wasn't really writing music at that point. I was like, I was a kid through, the end of high school. And I think The Way Up, their final album came out in '05, and I was in college at that point.
Okay.
So no, it didn't happen like that. But after he understood that I was really into jazz, which kind of happened separately, like because he was so busy when I was growing up, he didn't even know that I was really getting into jazz, or he knew maybe I was in jazz piano lessons, but he didn't know I was serious or that I was a really
Oh,
serious vocalist because he was in a very, very busy life, and just
yeah, sure.
see us every once in a while, hear little things from my mom, but didn't have any concept of how serious I'd gotten. And so then when I went to college for jazz voice, he was kind of like, wait, what? You're pursuing this? And he's like, are you sure you want to do that? I remember being in my dorm room and getting a call from him. Like we really, weren't really in touch very much. And he like made it very clear he wanted to be in touch and like mentor me and help guide me. And so that's when that started. But then I didn't really start composing until I was in grad school. So it was,
Okay.
he started mentoring me in the composition phase, maybe like in 2009 or 10, when he was kind of off the road, and he went into a retirement, as he called it, and he was just living in LA and doing his thing, pursuing his various interests.
Uh-huh.
And so all of our stuff happened over the phone. We had this like, I would schedule phone calls with him, and they would last like 2 or 3 hours because he was so brilliant. He had so much he wanted to teach me, and I was just very lucky to be on the receiving end of that.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, this is, we didn't discuss this in advance, but did he ever talk about the business side of music and how good or bad the business thing was at all?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't talk about it a lot. Because he was really all about the music. But I think, he was lucky that he partnered with Pat, who was, Lyle admits, like, Lyle would prefer not to have to be, in the spotlight all the time and be the one doing the interviews and being the one worrying about publicity. He really wanted to just be composing and have, band leading influence and arranging and all of that. So yeah, he liked to stay away from the business side of things. And he
Uh-huh.
was lucky enough and amazing enough to be able to do that, and lucky to have a great partner in Pat.
Yeah, I just always thought that the way that they balanced their thing, it was like the instrumental version of Lennon and McCartney or something,
Hmm. Yeah, they're
because
just an incredible
Pat
team.
was up there and he was always like rocking out so hard, and he
Hmm.
was doing things. And I remember doing the Winter Park Jazz Festival one year where I was on, my band was on, and then like two bands later, those guys came on, and they were playing that one tune, "Are You Going With Me?"
Hmm.
And Pat came out there, and I think Pat should have been he should have joined Dokken or Van Halen or Twisted Sister or AC/DC or something, just for a couple of tours, because he's just got that whole rock star thing going, and he would come
Totally
out there
does.
and he would just blast it, and
Lyle did too, actually.
well,
There.
it's a unique kind of intensity
Mm-hmm.
that they had in the push pull and the way they arranged all of that stuff. But I hope one day I get to meet Pat. I mean, did you hang out with Pat at all too in the backstage and talk to him?
A little bit, yeah. Pat is amazing. He's an incredibly kind and energetic person, like amazing memory. Whenever I would see him, like really every couple of years. And I remember on the last tour, or actually no, I went to see his trio like after the group stopped playing together in like '07 or '08, and he's
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, so I heard you're finishing up grad school this year at New England Conservatory," and I was like, "Oh, you know that about me?" And he's like, "Yeah, Lyle says you're just sounding amazing, and you're writing good music and stuff." So, yeah, he's very generous and nice person, and yeah, fortunately, I didn't get a lot of time to talk to him, but yeah, he's been
Right.
lovely. Yeah.
Well, the those of us that are in that generation are always just blown out and really happy to see a successor come along or a new person come along that's got all of those influences in there, because I hadn't heard anything like you or your music. And I remember sitting there on Sunday just going, I'm having a holy ass moment right here. And it's really early in the morning, and I've been up all night, like listening to stuff, trying to get ready for the balloting, the
Uh-huh.
final, first round ballot, getting all my songs together and stuff. And then boom, here you pop up. And, uh, and I just got so excited about it. So you went to the big schools, and you've had all of these influences and stuff, but this is your first album. Like, you took a long time to make it, right?
It took a really long time to make it. Yeah, it's true. And then after it was recorded, it took a while even then to come out. And some of that was it was Lyle's influence. He really felt strongly that my debut album should be really great. It should, he didn't want me to release something when I was really young and then regret it. And
Uh-huh.
and it's in some ways, I mean, everything happens how it happens, and for a reason, like you said. And I'm really happy with what came out. Really, I honestly I couldn't be happier with the album. It's exactly what I wanted it to be,
Wow.
and that's a pretty nice thing to be able to say about your first album. But yeah, but then of course it took a long time, and yeah, but like we were been saying, it kind of happened organically. I had a chance to play the music for many years, like 3 or 4 years. We were developing the material, so we went into the studio. It really just it felt so great. It was just like it was 2 8-hour days,
Uh-huh.
and it just flowed. Like, and the cool thing was after the first run through the first tune, I felt like I was hearing my music for the first time how I wanted to hear it, because I could hear everything balanced in my headphones, and so it was magical, really nice, and I really am happy I had that experience.
Well, it's an amazing sound, and when I heard it, I was listening on headphones, and then I came back the next day and I put it up in the studio on these Event 2 speakers, and I just blasted it. And
Awesome.
that's one of those things, like, it has to sound really good quiet, and it has to sound really good in medium levels. But then when I blasted it, the balance of everything was just so sonically nice, and then now I want to talk about, how do you make a commercial success out of some music like this, that mostly in music people, insiders, like recording academy people in jazz, for example, I get sent all those jazz vocal albums by everybody, and I know quite a few of the singers, and I'm known as a person that has ears because I've done 40 of my own albums and all these
Hmm.
tours and stuff. But going from, now we're in October, middle of October 2020, how do we get your album in front of all the booking agents for 2021 and all the reviewers that need to know about it? Because one of the reasons I wanted to put you on the show is just to shout your stuff from the mountaintop that I'm standing on right now,
Thank you.
because it's just like,
So nice.
it's everybody needs to listen to this as far as what the future of jazz vocal music is. And I heard you
Hmm.
sing standards too. I heard you sing the Peacocks tune. And in the 90s, I wrote music a lot like that, because I had Wilton Felder from the Crusaders, and I had Indugu in my band, and I had George Duke's bass player, Larry Campbell, and I was writing this stuff for live albums with all those weird intervallic leaps and the crazy stuff. And then I heard you sing that tune. I was going, how is that possible to stay in tune? Because you're leaping like you're leaping from like, you know, the E flat next to middle C, and then you're going up 2.5 octaves to the A above that, and then you're jumping back down and then boop, boop, boop. But even since then, I've had a couple of mornings where I just woke up and I was being haunted by you.
Wow.
And yeah, because I would hear ba 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 ba. I'm like, man, that really stays with me. That's the mark of a great recording. I mean, it's just so well done. But did you have to practice all that intonation stuff for years and years?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's got to be really hard to do vocally.
It's been a major priority of mine since the beginning. But like I was saying already, like the piano playing really helped, because just spending time as a child singing and tuning with the piano. And when I was in middle school, I got really obsessed with recording myself, like to a cassette tape, and recording myself singing with pop singers that I loved. Wow. And I was really specific with analyzing all the recordings. I don't know why I did that. I'm just a weird child, and I just write the lyrics out and then like write comments to myself, like, you know, change the tone here. This is out of tune. Fix the vibrato, and then I would do it again until I could sound exactly like who I was trying to sing with. And so I think that really helped not only with tuning, but also like just, you know, malleability, versatility, ability to imitate sounds. And I think that's what developed my own sound, you know, was taking in all these influences and really understanding them deeply, and then like filtering it through me. That's what, honestly, Lyle would always talk about that too. How like, don't worry about finding your sound, because worry about taking as much in as you possibly can, and then your sound will emerge.
Wow.
I love that.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's
well, it's not that many. I mean, I know a lot of people that are in music, and there's not that many people that say, well, you know, when I was in middle school, I was listening to these pop singers, and then I was making recordings of stuff and then making notes. And I was that kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was that kid too. I was like, okay, I got a cassette player. I'm going to try and do this thing. And I remember I wrote this one tune called Suntan Lotion, and it's on my Red Shoes album. And I found the cassette tapes recently in a box, and I had done 4 90-minute tapes just trying to write like 32 bars.
Whoa, that's cool.
You know, and I pulled them out, and I still have a cassette player, and I'm like, okay, I was just hammering at this thing in G, trying to run all this stuff over a G pedal tone, and that's why nobody liked me in junior high.
You were focused, though. You can't blame you for that.
Well, yeah, and then it turned out to be an opposite thing later, because as I started to do more gigs and get more acclaim, and then graduated high school, and then I went and studied with George Russell in New York with an amazing friend of mine from Denver. Then it turned around. It was like, wow, I've invested this time, and now I've got my own sound, and now instead of doing high school reunions, people are paying $30 to come to my show. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to go to the reunions, which I've never been to one of them. But I want to backtrack just a little bit, Aubrey, about you liking pop singers. Like, who do you like? Or who did you?
I was really into like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and Celine Dion. I even liked Britney Spears. I liked the Spice Girls. I liked, you know, the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Boyz II Men, Usher, all of them. You know, I was really, that was just like the mid 90s, you know, is when I started listening to the radio, and I was like, wow, this is so cool.
It was really cool.
So I was lucky to have like those great divas that were around at that time, like just amazing voices to try to emulate, you know. It's like, I'm really glad that I checked them out, and, you know, it's a cool thing. Yeah. And so, I feel like it just gave me more stylistic range, you know. Like when I got into jazz, I felt like I could adapt to that too, but then I never lost the ability to sing pop and stuff, you know. And so that's really helped. And obviously on my record, people say they can hear a pop influence. There's definitely some pop and folk and Brazilian. That's all in there. So.
Oh yeah. Well, the Whitney stuff and that era was just incredible for people in my generation. to go through, because I was right there in studios next to all these people, Preston Glass
Wow.
that wrote for her, and you know, Jeff Lorber and Kenny G and Angela Bofill and Dan. I got to play on all these albums as
Really?
as a
That's
session
amazing.
guy. Yeah, I did a lot of stuff that, you know, just quietly, you know, I don't get any residuals for it, but it's cool to be able to say, well, I did that stuff.
That's awesome.
And it was just, I love this concept that you're bringing forth, which is ingest all of the musical stuff that you can, and your own voice will emerge. That's the most important thing, I think, that got said this whole time so far. That's such
Mhm.
a great philosophy. So now, how are we going to make you a star? Or is that something you even want to do? Because
Um,
in jazz, you know, you can be a star and starve to death. You know, the jazz thing has always been really challenging. I think when Lyle and Pat hit in the late 70s, there was a convergence of factors that just kind of helped catapult them into, because they had the rock thing, and then they
yeah,
were a garage band, and then they had the big fuzzy hair jumping around.
that was
Right?
intentional. You know, they wanted to appeal to more than just jazz fans. They really talk. Lyle talked to me a lot about how he wrote all like layers in his music for everybody. You know, simplest, most beautiful diatonic melodies for people that just could tune into that, and
Uh-huh.
then like the fun rock grooves and like and then you know just on and appealing to every kind of listener. You know, and that's why they're so beloved. And yeah, but in terms of wanting to be a star, I mean, I what I want is to perform as much as possible. You know,
Uh-huh.
I love performing. It's really, I mean, it's where I get my joy in life, and I feel like I'm the best version of myself when I'm singing, and I love sharing that. And I've gotten to do a decent amount of traveling for all kinds of reasons, as a side
Really?
person, as a teacher, and you know, yeah, it's been really like it's been really cool. Of course, I always want to do more, but what I've done, I've loved it so much. So I just want to do more, and I want to meet more people and go more places. It's just what I love. So if that, you know, and being a star in jazz, like you said, like what does that even quite mean at this point? I
Yeah,
don't
what
know,
does that
but
even mean?
I just like to get out there, you know, and do more. That's what I want.
Yeah, I really hope that this the virus and the stuff going on in the world, that everything's going to kind of calm down, because it affects our community, the artistic community, really first. I mean, I've noticed that, like with different teachers and my mentors and stuff, they would always say the first thing to get cut off a budget is going to be band.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that except for the marching band, and they will always have a budget because they need backup for the football players.
Hmm.
And, you know, one of the first things that I saw happening with all these venues closing, and I've heard it, you know, from my friends in New York and Boston and LA and Tokyo and Switzerland, is like the bands, there's just all of these little gigs that we had were
Hmm.
just, you know, the things that kind of keep you going, where you can practice your new tune,
Hmm.
and you can just, oh, your friend stops in and they sit in and you go, oh, we'll collaborate, and then you start developing all this stuff. I think people that love to perform have a real need to be out there, because I'm very extroverted when it comes to that stuff, and I've been lucky. I've played in some huge bands. I played like a 2-year world tour with Bruce Willis, of all people,
What?
and people don't even know that he had a band.
I didn't know that. No.
And you know, I didn't care that the
Sure.
jazzers didn't know, because I got to go everywhere, and it was all movie stars, and it was all,
That's
you know,
awesome.
5-star everything, and it was just amazing. And then, you know, when you go all the way from that thing to back to the jazz clubs, that's an adjustment. But then now you have this beautiful album, and where the heck do you get to play? Is there anywhere you can play right now?
There are a few venues in New York that are doing live streaming from the venue. Like there's
uh,
which is something honestly, but Rockwood Music Hall is doing it. Smalls is doing it. This place called the Soapbox Gallery in Brooklyn is doing it. So there's a few places. So that's our like intermediary thing.
mm,
But those, you know, there aren't very many of those gigs. It's hard to get them, you know,
well,
and
and
it costs the venue a lot of money to put that on. It's really tough. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, in Denver, which is kind of my home away from home in LA, there was this ginormous scene going on here last year. It was ridiculous.
really,
There
I didn't
was
know
so
that.
much happening in Colorado,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
you know, and I still have family in Colorado, and I go back and forth between LA and Colorado a lot, there was this whole scene of all these young players that were just monsters coming in. And there were venues and there were little gigs, like little solo gigs and duo gigs, trio gigs. The big fish, of course, is Dazzle Jazz Club in downtown Denver.
Dazzle, yeah.
And, you know, I played there for years, and they've been very supportive of my stuff. But then I made this album. See, you went ahead and put your album out. I shelved mine. You know, I was just so terrified, and I was so depressed because I had all the young lions here. I had this bass player and drummer that were monsters, and you know, horn players, and I developed a whole new concept, and I put all this stuff together, and then our album release party got canceled.
Yeah.
And then everything else got canceled. And so, you know, I don't know what we're all gonna do. I mean, my friends in Manhattan are all saying that Broadway's closed for another year. And you know, it seems to me, and I mentioned this actually to somebody else, and I'm gonna bounce this off you, and you can tell me if I'm you know, crazy or not. But it seems to me like there ought to be something bigger than the Recording Academy, which does basically all it can to keep, you know, through music cares and charities and the awards promoting music's biggest night every year and all that. Why isn't there some national push with all these other groups of, you know, people that are all screaming, I'm in my little group and I want money and I want attention? Well, what are we getting, Aubrey? Shouldn't Facebook, since they've got billions of dollars, shouldn't they have a fund for people like us?
Oh, well.
Am I just being an idiot and being too?
I mean, the government should be supportive of artists. That's what they do in other countries, and that's that's the problem. But we don't need to get into that. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about, like, if the country finds art to be important, they support it and they give money and they make it possible for musicians. But it's very, very hard. It was hard before the pandemic to be a musician in this country. And yet we persist, and there's so much great music being made. I know in Brooklyn, I just relocated from Harlem to Brooklyn, just purely because I want to be near musicians.
Wow.
Before, during the, you know, normal times, yeah, it's easy to get in the subway and I see people out at gigs. But now I feel like I need to be physically near other musicians so I can have any semblance of, you know, a musical life. And, you know, people are still there. There's great people living in Brooklyn. There's a lot of cool concert series are happening, like, outside. I mean, now they kind of can't. They won't be able to soon, but over the summer. And people playing in the park, like amazing people playing in the park. Like, and playing out, like Bill Frisell did a concert in Ditmas Park, like outside of his house recently.
Wow.
And Becca Stevens, I'm sure you know who Becca Stevens is. She's so incredible. She did a little trio thing in Prospect Park. This is like world-class music happening outside. And so it's not, you know, it's not what we want it to be, but the people are still there and they still want to play music. And so that's why I'm there. I want to be part of the rebuilding, you know, whatever that might be, the reshaping. Wow. I want to be there for it. And so, yeah.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, I look at the big tech giants and stuff and all the arguing going on in society, and I just think, why don't we have an arts foundation by Jeff Bezos over at Amazon? If they're going to make $2 billion this year, why is not, you know, 1/10 of a penny sent to people like us in a giant foundation? Where are those charitable givers? I mean, what was
yeah, but I also tax laws, like if they're taxed more, then that money could be reallocated somewhere else, you know. But yes, that would be great if someone very rich decided, you know what, I'm going to support music. That would be amazing.
Well, I hope that person, or maybe, you know, some people that I know or other associates that I have can give you a little bump or a little push somehow. I mean, obviously I'm doing a podcast now, which is a bit like public service because I don't make anything. You know, everybody said, "Oh, your podcast is doing so well." Well, I don't get paid.
That's
I'm
very
getting paid
nice
for
of you.
this. I mean, it's not. I'm not at the Joe Rogan stage yet, where I can go to Spotify and say I've got 7 years of episodes, give me $80 million. But
You're definitely going to get there.
but I love doing the show, and I'm just so honored back at you to get a chance to chat with you today, because you're off to such an amazing start with your career, and the fact that you're so dedicated and versatile. I think that if you just stay with it and, stay in touch with all these people that because that's one of the ways that I've been able to survive as an artist. I had to pay almost all the recording costs of my albums, and I've done a lot. I was on Warner Brothers twice, and it was a horrible experience both times.
Oh no.
And I was on an indie when I first got well known in the 80s, and that was a horrible experience as well. So I'm self-financed a lot. And I'm like you, like I keep on doing stuff. I probably got 30 or 33 songs in the can right now. And, a couple of full albums. And I'm not really interested in writing, because what I'm trying to do is get people together and make the tone of our artistic community and the Recording Academy an uplifting tone. I like the uplifting tone because that's what it's supposed to be about, instead of all the conflict and all of the fighting and all the this side against that side and stuff. And when I heard your music, I was like, whoops, almost knocked over the palm tree.
Glad to inspire so much excitement.
Yeah, well, it is exciting. And now tell people how to get a hold of you and where your album is and the title of the album and, some of your social stuff. I mean, just let us know about that right now, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So the album is available. It's on the label Outside in Music. It's available on Amazon and iTunes or Apple Music and Spotify and Deezer, and it's also on Bandcamp and my own website. So all those different places you could stream it or buy it. And my social media, I'm on Instagram. It's Aubrey, my first name, and then Kayj, Aubrey KJ. Aubrey KJ on Instagram, and then Facebook, you just look me up. My artist page is there, my regular page is there, and I'm on Twitter. I don't use it a ton, but yeah, I'm on all the socials, and my website is www.aubreyjohnsonmusic.com.
Yeah, that's easy to remember. Yeah,
Aubrey Johnson Music, and I have a couple of music videos like that you were mentioning that I put out for the album, and then the whole album also is on YouTube, just as separate videos that with no actual video, so it's all there. You can find it really easily. I just love to have new listeners and happy to hear from anyone that wants to get in touch. My website has a contact page. Happy to hear from people. Oh, and also if you have anyone listening in Japan, I don't know, it's on a record label in Japan called Coreport, and they're lovely as well, and they put it out in their Tower Records, which they still have there, and
there's still a Tower Records.
There are, yep, and my album was there. Yep, is there. So 2 labels, they've both been wonderful. And and the album's called Unraveled.
I love it. Well, I know you're tight on time because you get a bunch of stuff going on today, but actually Japan is the only place in the world that you can get a hot dog at a KFC. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I did not know that. I haven't been to Japan yet. I really want to go. My violin player in the band is from Japan, and one of the songs on the record, which she wrote, I asked her to write, is in Japanese. So we got like a song in Japanese, a musician from Japan, and then it's on the label. So I really want to go. I can't wait. But I have been to Asia. I've been to some spots in China and in Taiwan.
Wow.
And I love Taiwan so much. It's like the best place. I know we were mentioning yesterday, talking about like favorite gigs and stuff.
Oh yeah.
That might be up there.
I've never had a chance to go to Taiwan, but I've done some really nutty things that people just thought I was insane, and I had so much fun. And one of them was in 1994, I went to communist North Vietnam to do a concert at the Hanoi Opera House. And I had a great band in those days. I mean, I had the top yo jazz guys from LA. I had Wilton Felder on sax, and I had Alfonso Johnson, and I had Indugu on drums, or Joel Taylor. And I get this call from I can't even remember who called. They said, "You want to play, in Hanoi for New Year's Eve?" And I'm like, man, go to Vietnam? Absolutely. That's right?
Awesome.
I know when somebody asked you to go to Taiwan, you didn't really hesitate, did you?
No, not at all. I mean, Taiwan is so amazing. I was there to teach at a camp for like 2 weeks, and I have to say, like, the nicest people I've ever encountered in the world are in Taiwan, and they're so lovely, and they're so helpful and kind and welcoming, and they really support and love jazz and the arts there. The whole town was plastered with posters for our faculty concert. And our faculty concert was at like one of the largest concert halls in, I think maybe it's the largest one in Taiwan, the National Theater and Concert Hall. We had
Wow.
sold out audience of like over 2,000 people. And we did like a Brazilian feature, a Brazilian themed concert. And this great Michael Philip Mossman, if you know, a trumpet player, arranger, he's awesome. I work with him at Queens College. We're in faculty together there.
Okay.
And he arranged everything. And then I sang this whole set of music in Portuguese as like the featured soloist for this huge audience, and I just had no idea what to expect, you know, when I was invited for this camp.
Right.
And you think like a faculty concert that could be like 300 people in an auditorium. But no, it was like a huge event in Taipei, and it was just awesome. And then they brought me back last year. I was there in December, and I did like a holiday concert at the university there. And it was like the same, like just wonderful experience. I really want to go back to Taiwan. I can't wait. It's like one of my favorite places.
Yeah, I've been lucky to be in Hubert Laws's band for more than 25 years as the orchestra chair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Cool.
yeah, it's really cool. I mean, when we play Rite of Spring, you know, based off of that 1970s recording he did with Don Sebesky arranging and all that, with the chamber thing. I'm the whole chamber thing and the Rhodes and the guitar and the
Check this
vibraphone.
out.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, you know, but Hubert has opened all those doors for me all of these decades, because last year we went to India, and you know, everybody was saying, oh, India, man, it's going to be so dirty and it's going to be so horrible, and you're going to get, you know, we didn't have COVID yet, but they would say you're going to have 20 shots and all this stuff. And I'm like, if I know Hubert, it's going to be really cool, because he never takes a gig that isn't just plush. You know, so
That
me and
sounds
Lan
awesome.
Richards get on the plane, and we're flying and we're flying and we're flying, and we're just like, it's 30 hours. Now it's 33 hours. And we're going through all this stuff. And then we get to the place, and it's a whole private city. It's all walled off with these like big walls and these gates. And there's 7 buildings in there. And there's the master bedroom suite that they gave to me because I'm the biggest guy in the band and they don't want to mess with me. And we had food stocked, like every kind of food. And every day they would bring homemade bread, and they would bring coffee, and they would bring fresh fruit plates and stuff. And, you know, I found myself sitting there, and I'm a cigarette smoker, and it was 4 steps from the edge of my master king size bed to the smoking garden with my little plush garden box in the sky.
Wow.
And so I'm on
Very
WhatsApp sending these things to Venice Beach going, I don't think I want to come back anytime soon. I'm just really enjoying being over here. But, you know, travel enhances everything about your life, and you begin to understand and appreciate different aspects. And, you know, it's just the best thing. And for people that are unhappy in America, that's what I've always suggested to them, because I've been an international traveler for, I don't know, 30 years already. And it's just so interesting to go somewhere else where they're like, oh, well, we would never do it that way, and here's how we have done it for centuries.
Yeah.
And you just go, man, because you're going to love Japan and they're going to love you.
I can't wait to go someday when it's possible.
Well, you know, I got my fingers crossed, and I'm sending out great vibes to you and all your band today, and especially your piano player, who's just insanely good.
Thank you so much, Chris
You know,
Ziemba. He's
just
incredible.
tell him, you know, Rob Mullen said, you're doing the right thing because you're not smiling too much, because they'll write you up bad if you're too smiley. Don't smile too much, because LA Times doesn't like it.
Okay.
Downbeat doesn't like that either.
Good to
Don't
know.
forget, jazz is serious. You can't.
You can't have fun. No, you know, a lot of people have fun. Our band has a lot of fun. I couldn't love those people more.
Yeah, well, good luck with everything you're doing, and I'll be sure to spread the word about your album everywhere I possibly can. And thank you so much for coming on my show, Aubrey. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's so nice to meet you, and I can't wait to check out all of your gigantic catalog of music as well. I've heard a little bit, but it's so cool to make the connection and hear all your stories too. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you'll hear some Lyle and my stuff, and you'll hear some Weather Report. The early stuff is like really Weather Report-y. And, you know, it wasn't until the Soulscape record when I kind of really got my sound going. But there's plenty there to listen to if you ever have time. So
Oh, totally.
you
Will
know,
do.
send me an
Absolutely.
email anytime you want, and let's just keep it all rolling.
Yeah, I know we'll stay in touch. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your show.
You got it. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, you
Bye.
too.